All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Faith, Family, and Friends. Look like we have some technical difficulties, but we're okay. I'm Pastor Ralph with you tonight with our show. Last night we had a great interview with a young man from Virginia. Tonight we're interviewing Dan Reagen, the author of 2 volumes of classic rock songs revealed. And we're going to get right into the whole story of how Dan came to write this book. But Dan is a 5-time Emmy award-winning sports producer, broadcaster. Dan, is that right?
I was a director, correct.
Director. And on your LinkedIn bio, it says a seasoned broadcast professional with many years experience directing live sporting events. You've covered Major League Baseball, the NHL, NBA, NCAA, football for ESPN. You work for Turner Sports Network and the Peacock station, the Sports Network. And I'm thinking, boy, if we had the time and we could do round 2, we could just talk about that, because I've been a sports nut all my life. I'm mostly a New England fan, Red Sox, Celtics. I remember the days of Dave Cowens even, and Hank Finkel, who came off the bench, and Havlicek and JoJo White. So, and of course, my beloved Patriots. But I won't ask what your favorites are. They're probably not a New England sports team. No. Okay. Are you rooting for the Eagles? Let me ask you that, or Kansas City in the Super Bowl?
Kansas City.
Okay. All right. We'll see what happens this weekend. But Dan, it's great to have you on our show. I am thoroughly enjoying volume 1. And I just want to ask, I know the answer because I've read the intro. We've texted back and forth. Whatever possessed you to write a book about classic rock songs? I think the story is amazing, and how that you had the patience, maybe I'm giving a little bit of the answer now, to hold on to this baby for all these years and to finally see it come to fruition must be a hugely rewarding thing in your life.
It is a hugely rewarding thing. To start at the very beginning, the whole genesis of this idea happened back in the 80s, the early 1980s. In December the 8th, 1980 was a very sad and important day in my life and in the life of the music industry and the whole world. That was the day John Lennon was murdered outside Dakota Apartments. And I, like everybody else, pretty much found out about it on Monday Night Football. But that also was Jim Morrison's birthday, and I was sitting in my dorm room in college and listening. They were doing the top 10 of 10 Doors songs, and when the Doors finished, they went into "Jesus Is Just All Right by Me" by the Doobie Brothers. And halfway through that, where the song starts to slow down, the announcer potted down, and he came on and told us what had happened.
Wow.
And Ralph, I was devastated. So John Lennon was my favorite musician. The Beatles were my favorite group next to in Chicago, but John Lennon was my guy. And so that affected me. Well, a couple of months after his death, Playboy released a set of 2 interviews they had done with him. And the second one was John Lennon explaining what all the Beatles songs were about. And I got that, and I was like, this is the the keys to the kingdom. Absolutely. He went down every single one, and whether it was Paul's song and I just contributed the middle eights or whatever. And I was fascinated, and I said, why can't everybody do this? Why can't everybody tell us what their songs are about? And so that's 1981. And along the way, when I got into TV and I started getting deeper in my career, I mentioned it to 1 or 2 people that I wish there was a book about this. And that's really as far as it went. And then in 1993, my wife and I moved to Atlanta. That's when I went to work for Turner Sports. And I was working with a man I shared an office with, who had written a book about the Civil War, about the bloodiest battle of the Civil War. I walked into the office one day, I saw a stack of papers on his desk about this high. I asked him what it was. He said it was his manuscript to this book. And he went into started explaining it, and I was really fascinated by his passion and his love for the subject.
Mm.
And so I just, filed that away.
Yeah.
And about a year later, Walter Becker and Donald Fagen, Steely Dan, they decided that they were going to get back together and they were going to go out and tour.
Mm.
And they one of the first stops was in Los Angeles, and I was out there at the time with my wife. Had a dark day and went and saw the concert, and it was phenomenal.
Mhm.
About 3 weeks later, they came to Atlanta. We went and saw the show again, and when that show was over, we got in the car, and my wife looked at me. She said, "Weren't they great?" And I said, "They sure were." And she said, "Don't you wish there was a book that explained what all their songs were about?"
Wow, it's like she's reading your mind or your spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, "Yes, I do." And then under my breath, I said, "I'm going to write it."
Wow.
We
That's so cool.
we got home. I went down to the basement, grabbed the old Playboy issue that had Lennon explaining it, get back into bed. You can imagine the scene.
Yeah,
My
right.
wife comes in, "What are you doing?" Right. Honestly, honey, I'm reading
This is
the interview.
for the article. Yeah.
And so, years later, I've obviously I threw away the magazine, but I've kept the interviews.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And here it is, all these years later.
Wow.
And I told her, I said, "You might not believe this, but I've been thinking for a while that I want to write a book. I want to try and interview as many people as I can
Mhm.
and ask them what their songs are
Mm.
all about and about the songwriting process." And
Right.
I started in 1994. I did it for about 4 years.
Mhm.
I got about, a good 30 interviews done. I made a list of people, and I included producers because George Martin of the Beatles,
Right.
he's the fifth Beatle, let's face
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
So but after about 4 years, at that time, I had two young sons. They were grade school age,
Mhm.
and my wife had an illness. I was traveling a whole lot with Turner Sports,
Mm.
and it was just I was running into a lot of obstacles. I was calling managers and asking, "Is this person available?" "No, he's in the studio doing a record. Call us back in 6 months."
Mhm.
6 months would go by. I'd call them back.
Yeah.
"He's out on the road promoting the record," and it
Uh-huh.
just it
Yeah.
was like a vicious cycle, on top of which many people were saying, "No, not interested."
Mhm.
So all of those things, I just decided I needed to take a pause. I hit the pause button,
Didn't
and
give
that was
up on it though.
19. Sorry?
Didn't give up on it though, right? But just knew it for a
No.
season. Yeah, you had to.
Yeah. I mean, I hit the pause button, and I stopped, pursuing this,
Mhm.
but I didn't stop listening to the music.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it haunted me. I listened to the, classic rock station, and I'd
Mhm.
hear Taking Care of Business by
Yeah.
BTO. And I'm like, "Hi, I spoke to Randy Bachman and he told me about that." And then the next song would come on.
That would give
And
you
so,
energy to. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so it went a long time.
Mhm.
I didn't approach it again until about 2020. My brother and
Wow.
sister-in-law have a special needs daughter. And my sister-in-law decided to write and self-publish a book about bringing up this daughter of theirs.
Mhm.
And I was so proud of her for doing that. And she sent it to me and I read it, and I called her up and I said, "I got two things to say to you." She says, "What's that?" I said, "Number one, I'm really proud of you. And number two, I want to thank you because you've inspired me to get back on the horse and
Oh,
do this."
cool. Wow.
And so I got back on the horse and I started calling back a lot of the same people that said no.
Uh-huh.
Many of them still said no.
Yeah.
Did it for a little bit, maybe a year or two. Then I stopped again, picked it up again in like 15, 16, did it and stopped again. I just kept finding ways to just not get myself motivated enough to do it.
Mhm.
Well, 2020, March of 2020, we all know what happened.
Mhm.
COVID comes, the
Right.
whole world shuts down, takes my job, takes everybody's job, and we're
Mhm.
all, you know,
Sitting at
homebound.
home. Yeah.
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 And so that was the final straw. It was like, now I've got no excuses.
Yes.
I've got to get this done.
Right. Yeah.
And so at the same time, along the way during that process, I knew I needed somebody to help me. I
Mhm.
needed another set of eyes. I needed somebody who could, help edit it and
Mhm.
just somebody to bounce stuff off of.
Mm.
And I tried a couple of different friends, and they all, were interested to some degree, but they all at the same time said, "I don't think I can really wrap my mind around this, and I don't have the
Mm.
same passion for it you do."
Yeah. You want
Well,
somebody
lo
with
and
the
behold,
same, yeah,
yeah,
passion.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So luckily, I have a very dear friend who I've known for over 50 years. he reached out to me and he said, "Are you still looking for somebody to help you?" And I said, "I sure am." And he told me about his daughter, who was a freelance writer. And he said, "Would you be interested in speaking to her?" And I said, "I'm sure, you know." And so we got together. It's Catherine LaCroix. And the very first conversation, I said to her, "Listen, your yes has to mean yes. You cannot come back to me. You can't say yes now and then come back to me, 2 months, 3 months from now and go, yeah, I've got a lot of other work. I'm tied up. You can't do that. I've got to get this done."
Yeah.
And she understood,
Yeah.
she did. And we clicked. And
Awesome.
at the same time, more people started saying yes. And I thought I was going to have like a 12 or maybe a 14 chapter book. But then all these other interviews happened. And then I had so many that I broke it into 2 volumes.
Wow, that's amazing. Amazing. That you held on to that long, and that your tenacity to get it done, and the self-discipline and pulling it off the shelf time and time again has finally been rewarded. I want to ask you this. To me, the book's theme, I think, and maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong or confirm if I'm right, but for me, anybody that has followed music to any degree, whether it's classic rock, pop, whatever the genre, knowing the story behind the song is just something that beats in, I want to say, most, if not all of us who love music and have grown up with radio through the years, and we're spinning the albums, we have the cassette tape or the CDs, and now we've got Spotify. Do you think that's generally true, that hopefully that's what this book will do? Is, I mean, I was just riveted by Billy Joel's writing his songs from his dreams. I mean, that's like the surrealists who painted their pictures back in the day, and that was the school of art, that they would go to sleep on purpose and paint from their dreams. I don't think Billy Joel did that, but he did find out in your interview with him that he had these songs going on, and I don't want to give a whole lot away, but I think sharing some of these little tidbits here in your book hopefully encourages people to purchase the book and read it. But do you think that's generally true, that those of us who follow music through the years, like, how did he or she come to write that? That seems to be something that's common in many of us.
Yeah, I think so, and I hope so. And I mean, and I have found that a lot of the people that have purchased the book have come back and told me that once they read the stories, that makes them want to go listen to the record, the tape, or this. Yeah. I've had several people. One of my neighbors told me that he said, "It's going to take me a long time to read your book, Dan, because after I read a chapter, I'm now going back and listening to every song that you wrote about." And I'm like,
getting the total experience, right? Yeah,
exactly.
That's so cool.
And I've had a couple of people tell me that, and that's and the reverse has been true, where people have asked me, what's your book about? And then I tell them, I'll give them a story, and they go, "Well, that makes me want to go listen to the song." I go, "Right."
That's right. And I could say that even with our interviews here, when we've interviewed musicians, we've done bluegrass, country, contemporary Christian music, when we've had artists on who have quite a body of work, say Dallas Holm or Leon Patillo, who was with Santana at one time, it's a win-win. You're getting the message out there, whether it's us through our interviews, you through the book. And then I think that people love that you're really genuinely interested in the story behind the story, the story behind the song. I think people love that they're being listened to and taken seriously, not just put on a pedestal and, because they're famous and made a lot of money, whatever. Did you find that with your interviews, that maybe those who consented and want to be interviewed, that that maybe you felt an impartation or just some good atmosphere, good vibe, that they really were thankful that you were interested?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I've made it very clear to all of their representatives that this book was not about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's strictly about the songwriting process and the story behind the songs. And before I would start rolling tape, or as I was rolling tape, I would reiterate that to the artist. I'd say, just to reiterate, all I'm asking you about is how you get from point A to point B, where the inspiration for your songs come, and how you go through the process. I'm not going to ask you personal questions.
That's good.
And there were a couple of them that were like, "Wow, that's really cool."
Refreshing.
And they, exactly. I mean, there were a couple of instances where like I was face to face with Don Henley, and I was asking him about the song "The Heart of the Matter," and that he co-wrote with J.D. Souther. I mean, great tune. And he immediately said, "Well, it's a very personal story, and I don't really want to go deeply into it." And I'm like, "Yeah, fine." But then he did, and he kind of let us in that it was about a breakup, and he admitted how he had screwed up, and that both he and JD had gone through breakups at the time, and that was they co-wrote this song about their breakups.
Wow.
And then I had Christine McVie from Fleetwood Mac, and I said to her, how do you not ask about rumors? How do you?
Right. Yeah.
It sold 40 million copies.
Right.
So, and I said to her, I don't want to delve too deeply here, but what was it like? What was it like trying to be so creative when all of this was going on?
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, yeah," and she said, "Oh, it was crazy." But we had safe areas. There were rooms where, as long as John and I weren't together, and as long as Lindsay and Stevie didn't get together, she said, but after as it went on, we could laugh about it. She said even Mick Fleetwood laughed about his bankruptcy. She said so, but there were safe places where we could go during that process and still create. And I mean, look what they put out.
Yeah, an amazing body of work. And maybe, I know you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it would also seem true that maybe these last few years, when you picked that up off the shelf again, 2020, having the time of COVID, putting us into our own homes and have that moment, that space, that then maybe we're in a time frame where some of these rock groups and individuals and bands are trying to maybe, where am I with my music now? Can I reinvent it? Because of course, a lot of bands have got back together through the years, and that's not just a recent thing. Probably last decade or so, we've seen that. And most of it, I think, has been good. I've seen Chicago, and of course, they've never really stopped. The story of Journey and how they got the new singer to take Steve Perry's place is an amazing rags to riches story. Yeah. Incredible. You think that maybe some of that had contributed, but maybe you getting more people being positive about saying, "Hey, yeah, I'll be interviewed."
Yeah, that there's some truth to that. And what I found out, which was really interesting, and I mean, to be perfectly honest, most of these artists are in their mid to late 70s.
Right.
And they're not thinking about hanging it up anytime soon. This is what they do.
Yes.
I interviewed John Lodge, told me that he was basically of Moody Blues. He was really like climbing the walls, and he and his wife couldn't get back to Great Britain. And so they have children in Florida, and they went and lived at the kid's house in Florida. And he and his son-in-law built a studio in the garage, and they started playing because it's just like he couldn't. He has this creative flow, and to just sit back and not be able to go out, and he admitted that he really feeds off the energy of the people.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know that a similar confirming story. My cousin lives up here in Michigan, Petoskey, and Mark Farner lives just below her, and from Grand Funk Railroad, and he's got his own band, and they're always play music in the barn, and she can hear it. She jokes about how her dog and his dog got together, but I mean, you can't stop the creative juices from flowing, regardless of whether you're 20 or 70. It's just something. Well, who said one time, you find something you love to do, you never have to work a day in your life. And I think that's true about musicians, artists, writers, well, even sports producers like yourself. I mean, and not all of us have had that luxury of being able to be in a job where we love so much that it doesn't even seem like we're breaking a sweat. But I think that's true for a lot of the rock singers through the years, and the bands and individuals that have come and gone. Does anyone individual stand out? Or maybe it's hard to put any kind of value on that, or how do you? I'm sure you got memories of being with them live and in person or on the phone. What was that like?
It's really, it was, first of all, it was a great honor to talk to all these people. Because but let's face it, first and foremost, we're fans. And to just have the opportunity to sit and pick these people's brains was really something that I'll never forget, and as I would go back and read through the interviews or something like that, or look at the book, I can hear their voices, cool. Wow. But to get to your question, you know, and this is not a cop out, all of them, I enjoyed talking to all of them, but there, you know, the maybe the two or three that stand out, of course, I'm a big Chicago fan. I mean, Chicago
me too.
was my band.
My wife.
Okay. And yeah, and when I interviewed Jimmy Pankow, their trombone player, I told him right off the jump, and he said, "Sounds like you got something pretty interesting going on here. I hope I can help you." And I said, "I'm pretty confident you can." And I came clean. I said, "Look," I said, "I have to tell you," I said, I'm a big fan of yours. I said, "You're my favorite musician, not named John Lennon." And he was like, "Whoa."
Oh,
And he was yeah, he was really blown away by, and he got into it, and he got into it so much that we were talking, and I heard him like pick up his keys and start to walk, and he goes, "Dad, hold on a second." And I said, "Look, I don't want to take up too much more of your time." He goes, No, I'm enjoying this." He goes, "I have to go run down to the doctors and pick up a prescription." And he talked to me through that whole process.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool.
Of going, yeah. So, and you mentioned Billy Joel. I mean, I've told many people this, that Billy Joel, and I don't know if it really comes through in the book, but he's really funny. And if Billy Joel wanted to just stop, you know, performing, he could go out and do stand-up comedy. He was really,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
intelligent. That's amazing. Wow. You know,
Yeah.
I don't want to belabor this point, but I think it brings up another shade of what we were talking about, how that, and maybe it's this, and you intimated it early when you talked about how that it was refreshing that you were genuinely concerned, but the media and you know, society objectify the individual. And you're telling them that this is not about sex, rock and roll. I think really must have made them, wow, breathe a sigh of relief. That finally somebody from the National Enquirer, paparazzi, is not after me for a photo op or whatever, but they just genuinely, and so it is all about relationship. I mean, you might have said, "I'm your fan," but there was that sincerity, and then that genuineness of really hearing their story. And then I think that kind of makes them want to share a little bit more, you know? So I found that anyway with our job here too, interviews with people. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, that's a very great observation. Another person that would be on that list, who admittedly prior to the interview, I was very familiar with their music, but it wasn't like I was really big fan. Dennis DeYoung of Styx. And he did his homework on me. We had the interview set. I thought it was for like a Wednesday afternoon. On Tuesday, my phone rings and it was him. And he goes, "Hey, we're gonna talk today." And I said, "I think we were set for tomorrow. If it's more convenient for you today." He goes, No, that's okay." And I was like, because I still had a couple more things I wanted to just nail down.
Yeah, right.
And so we chatted a little bit, and he started asking me about my television career, and we started talking baseball. And then the next day, so we already had a rapport.
That's great.
And then he is such a interesting guy, and he's just a very down to earth, gregarious, plain spoken. All right, he says to me, "Let me tell you, I'm going to tell you how to write a song. You can throw away all those other interviews." This is what he says, and it's in the book. Yeah.
Wow.
So we spoke for over 2 hours.
Wow. Yeah. I think it disarms them when we treat them like another human being, because maybe in some ways they went. I know the story about Kerry Livgren when he and Dave Hope and John and Dino Elefante split from Kansas. He was put on a different kind of pedestal from the Christian music industry, who had heard about his conversion, and it just turned him off. And I can't say I didn't blame him. I don't blame him. This is back in the late 80s, I think it was. And he went off into the mountains in Colorado, built his own studio, did AD, the band AD, he wrote Seeds of Change, but he kind of went off the radar and didn't really do a whole lot of interviews. And I think that, you know, if people knew these groups, that there are people like you and I, and I'm sure we're not an exception, who are genuinely interested in their stories in a way that they're not like a sycophant, you know, but that are, hey, this is what you've done in my life. And having that opportunity as you did, and we do sometimes, to tell them, man, the song or your body of work really made such a impact in my life at a time when I really needed to hear this song, or maybe needed an upbeat, something more, you know, joyful, or working through a breakup, like you were mentioning, the two artists there. So you're getting this book out now, and how can we help you? I know that we earlier, and I mentioned again, we want to give away a copy of volume 1. This is mine, so nobody can have this copy. I'm going to write it. I'm just going to eat it up. Volume 2, but those who, the first person who makes a comment tonight about our interview, we're going to send you. I just ordered, and I texted you earlier if you were willing, if they gave a positive review of volume 1, that would get you to sign a copy of volume 2 and hopefully send it to that same winner. So we'll do that, Dan. What's the next step? Are you traveling with the book and try to promote it on a book tour, or how's that going?
Well, I am going to start traveling a little bit.
Okay.
I self-publish, so all of this I'm underwriting all of this. I've done 4 or 5 of these types of interviews, which has been wonderful, and I've enjoyed them very much. Beginning not this coming weekend, but the next 2 weekends, my wife and I are going to be hitting the road. We're going down to Florida, to Amelia Island, Florida, to a book festival. Cool. There's going to be like 92 authors there, and we're going to take part in that. And then the following weekend, we're going to be up in Tennessee at another book festival. And I've got a couple of others that I haven't really committed to yet that I've got circled. There's like book festivals every month of the year. So these first 2 will be like a test drive to see, what kind of feedback we can get and how many, we can produce some more sales. Good. So that's the game plan for now.
Well, let's stay connected, because we love to keep connecting people. I know that with some authors we've had, like Bruce Cameron of Dog's Purpose, he's on book tour now with his newest book about Clancy the dog. And he's looking for places here in Michigan, other places throughout the country. If you need a place to come, certainly you can hang out here with my wife and I here in the little town of Fulton. We're between Battle Creek and Kalamazoo, and they're fairly large cities here in Michigan, and lots of bookstores and booksellers, and craft fairs and so forth. So good luck. That's all I can say. And I'm going to be anxious just to read through some of this. We do something on our sign that I probably has, I don't know how anybody takes it, but being the pastor, I'm like, I'm going for it. And sometimes we'll take a line from a famous classic rock song, and if the line has a value that speaks of faith or intimates that, I'll put it right on the marquee. So this last week, I don't know if it was your book that inspired me, but we put a line from REO Speedwagon's song, I'm going to keep on loving you. And there's a part of that chorus that, hey, this could be God saying that. So we just put a slash, REO Speedwagon / God. You never know who's driving by, who that might speak to, because I believe that God speaks through all kinds of different ways. Certainly his word, but the songs of great people through the years. So thanks for your effort and staying with it for how many years since you first had the idea?
Well, from start to finish, from the time that I told my wife after the Steely Dan concert to the time that it came out last March on her birthday, March the 18th. It was 28 years.
28.
So
Wow.
yeah, and I tell people, if more than anything, obviously I want them to hopefully go to my website, classicrocksongsrevealed.com, buy the books. If you're a Kindle reader, you can get them on Amazon as well. But my website, classicrocksongsrevealed.com, has it. But more than anything else, I besides people enjoying the book, I hope, my biggest hope is that people can take away from my story the word perseverance.
Yes.
That never let anybody tell you can't do something. If you have a dream, go for it.
Yes.
I'm living proof. These books are living proof that no matter how many times I put the brakes on and I kept putting obstacles up,
yes,
I finally was able to reach, the promised land and get it done.
Yeah. So anybody out there listening tonight, if you've got a book in you, a seed of an idea of a book, or whatever it may be,
whatever it may be.
That's right. Exactly. It's matter you, and you really feel inspired that God or a higher power has put it in you. Don't give up on it. Don't ever give up.
And that's exactly what I tell people too, because those are the words of Jim Valvano, the late great coach from, and he made that brilliant speech at the ESPYs where he said, "Don't give up, don't ever give up." And this man was dying. He passed away like a week or two later, but he just gave that impassioned speech, and ESPN replays it every year. And that's the message that I really want people to take away. besides this music is timeless, of course,
Yes, it
is that don't ever give up on your dreams.
Mhm.
Don't ever give up.
That's awesome. Well, I'll tell you, you've inspired Dream in Me. There are several books in my mind and heart that I've gotten the back, and some I've started. But I thought when in looking forward to our interview, that would it be something to do a book on classic contemporary Christian songs, the top, say 100, whatever, through the years. Now, my question would be, and I don't know if you had a way to gauge this, because you could go back in the charts and see which one stayed on the hit list the longest and say, okay, I got to do that one. But I don't want to go there. I mean, I will just for stats, but to me, it's like the impact of the song. That's what I want. Did it move the needle in the lives of people or society or culture? And I'm not sure if that's something that kind of helped you focus on certain ones or not. I think but you've encouraged me to do that. So I'm starting to put feelers out. And of course, we've done some interviews with people in the CCM business who have had some songs where, and my typical answer, how did you get that? Was it a epiphany all of a sudden, like Billy Joel's dream? Or was it a work in progress? You had to pick it back up, lay it back down, pick it back up. Typically, it's been probably, I would say 70-30, 70% where a labor of love, where it didn't come to them all at once. I don't know what you have found in rock artists, whether they had to go back and work on it, kind of tweak it. But it seems like it's more that way than just all the words fell right down from heaven. So.
Yeah, and more times than not, they have to really work the song through. There were a couple of instances along the way, like back to Jimmy Pankow, the Chicago's very famous song, Just You and Me. He and his wife had a really bad argument to the point where she had locked herself in the bathroom and was calling, you're a beast, get away from me. And he was like, do I go through the door and try and settle this? And then he went to the piano. He had one of those boom boxes on top of the piano. He sat down and it just all came to him all in one piece. He said it had never happened to him before or since. The whole song just came right out through his fingers. And when he was done, he was like, wow, what just happened?
See, now I just get the feelings there with that song and with that story, as you said, with a couple of others who said they had to go back and listen. That just brings such a fullness to the whole lyric and the message of that, knowing the story behind the song. Wow, incredible. Wow.
Yeah. And to your idea, and I've flirted with that same type thing as well. I would give anything to be able to find out from Lauren Daigle, not just You Say, which is 4 years. It was on the charts for like 252 weeks.
Wow.
But she has a song called How Can It Be? And Ralph, I'm telling you something, that song to me, it's 4 minutes and 20 seconds of the gospel. It is the gospel message in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. And every time I hear that song, I get chills.
Wow.
And sometimes the chills turn into tears. And it's just, because the words are so powerful. Yeah. And that's the power of music.
Yeah, power of music. It's incredible. We could go on and on. We need to catch up with you in a few months, seriously. And let's stay in touch. But let me say a prayer for you. I always like to pray with my guests, and I'm going to pray that God will just give you success in your endeavors. Amen. Father, thank you so much for this wonderful time with Dan, brother in the Lord. I thank you for giving him this idea. How many years ago, Lord? Incredible that you gave him the tenacity and the remembrance to not put it away in the closet, but just keep it on the back burner. And Lord, just in the nick of time or just in the right seasons, you happen to bring that out, and now it's out there. And I pray that you give him every success, not just for his own satisfaction of having done a job well done and the impact, but Lord, for what it might mean to the artists that he interviewed, and for all of us who have followed the lives of these people, these artists and these songs for years, and maybe even give them an extra special feeling that their music is still worth something in people's hearts everywhere, Lord, as we reflect back on the years when before the music died, so to speak, Lord. Thank you, Father, for his life. Keep him in health and safety, and bless his family. Thank you so much for our time together. For those who are listening tonight, Father, who They may have come across this live broadcast who have a hope of a dream that they feel is dying inside, that Lord, you would resurrect that tonight through the words that Dan has been able to share, to see somebody really live and in person talking about how they were able to do it and see it come to fruition. We give you praise and we love you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
God bless you, brother.
Thanks, Ralph.
We'll be in
God
touch.
bless you, man. Thank you so
Okay.
much. I enjoyed it.
I did
Thank you.
too. See ya.